Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 36 of the Glimmer Gang podcast. We got a special one today. Obviously, with the release of Into the Inklands coming up, we are going to be talking limited and sealed. We are joined by the limited and sealed draft specialist, Nive from Nive's Nerds Corner. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing very well. How are you doing?
I am doing great. We're also joined by our lovely co-host, Sean. How are you doing today, sir?
Hello, I'm doing fantastic.
We are unfortunately without Blake. He is on a little vacation in Florida, soaking up those sun rays. He is going to get a little. I think he's getting a box or two down there, I
I
believe.
believe so.
Um,
Ooh.
Something like
so
that.
yeah, it's kind of wild that Inklands is here. Um, I'll do this before we get into the topic of limited. Sean, I'll start with you. Just thoughts and just how are you feeling with a new set coming out this week?
I'm super duper excited. I think the set is going to open up this game so much more than it has been up to this point.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of new cards in this set. Lots of new stuff to play around with. Nive, thoughts on Into the Inklands?
Yeah, 204 brand new cards to play with,
Mm-hmm.
which is fantastic. And I really like this 3-month spread that they have. During Rise of the Floodborn, about 8 weeks in, I was starting to get a little antsy. And that's right about when spoiler season started up. And so I really like the system that they have where we're able to get a nice cycle going on. Very excited for this. Brand new card type, brand new mechanic. Very excited.
Obviously, locations are new. They are the final piece of the puzzle, it feels like, for Lorcana and everything. But we're here to talk about Limited today. Talk about Draft and Sealed. And so, Nive, you want to give our listeners just the kind of basic overview of what Limited is and how it is different if they haven't played it before?
Yeah, absolutely. So most people are very familiar with the idea of constructed, where you build a deck from your collection and you take it to the store.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how that's kind of the difference between constructed and limited, where in constructed you bring the deck to the store, in limited you get to take a deck out of the store.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the best way for me to describe it, where you are given cards and you play and build with the cards that you're given. There are currently 3 different forms of limited in Lorcana. We have the pre-constructed, more commonly known as a starter deck challenge,
Mm-hmm.
where you're given a starter deck and the pack inside the starter deck, and you play with that deck for the tournament. We have draft, where you sit at a table with usually 7 other people. The size of the table kind of changes depending on who's available. And you basically do like what sports teams do with drafts, where instead of players, you're picking cards that you get to put into your team or your deck for the event. And then sealed, where you are given 6 packs and you build a deck from that. So it'd be like building a team at a high school where you don't get to choose the players you have, but you still build a deck or team with them.
You know, being a sports person, I really like those analogies, so I'm going to run with those. Uh, yeah, that is what limited is. Now, Sean, I'll pose this question to you. You obviously are very much a comp centered uh, player.
Yes,
You were
sir.
on a team in the past for Digimon. And so when you take a look at constructed versus limited, as someone who doesn't spend as much time as it with Nive, how would you go about these different type of events?
Well, really, you got to look at different criteria as far as strong cards when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to the limited formats opposed to constructed formats, and I think it's pretty great that you get to see some cards shine that necessarily wouldn't see the light of day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I have another question right back. And you can both answer this, but Sean, I'll ask you first. If you had to pick between pre constructed, draft, or sealed to play in, what would you choose?
Hmm. Probably sealed.
Hmm.
Yeah, probably sealed. That's just the waters that I like to float around in.
Nice. Nive?
I like draft. I enjoy all three for different reasons, but I like draft the most because I get to select the cards.
Mm-hmm.
There's still an element of randomness and an element of parity within all the players,
Mm-hmm.
but you still get to add that deck building and card evaluation skill in to it.
Mm-hmm.
While the other two aspects of limited don't focus on that improvisational card evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will also agree. I draft is my favorite just because, like you said, you with sealed and pre-constructed, you're kind of just you have to use what you have. You don't really have any other options. Obviously, like in sealed, you could have really good packs, you could have really bad packs, and it kind of just depends. In draft, you could have really good packs and really bad packs, but you're also getting to look at usually seven other packs as well, eight total packs to pick your cards from. And so, yeah, I'm going to say draft. Pre-constructed, honestly, I don't mind because I think it's just fun because it's really a fair playing field in a way. Everyone has, I mean, like the first set was three, but like everyone has the two same decks essentially. So, yeah.
Mhm.
So, now the first question I have for you is going into Inklands, what is one way players should prepare for this set specifically?
Prepare for locations. Locations completely change the game.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have is basically this additional aspect of the game
Mm-hmm.
where in Rise of the Floodborn in first chapter, your characters had the decision of challenge a character or quest. Yet you had like sing a song and activate an ability, those little like possible third options, but you always had two options. With this, you now have a third option of challenging a location.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, you also have just the added complexity of can I outrace my opponent's locations? Should I use my challengers to take out their locations or should I take out their characters first? It adds a level of complexity that is good for the game. I don't think it's so complex to where it can kind of difficulty creep people out, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But it's still something that it's going to feel very wonky and it's going to feel weird in your first couple drafts, but eventually you'll get used to it and you'll get into the flow of it.
Yeah, definitely something to watch out for. And then I'll pose this question to you, Sean, going off of Knives' answer with locations and being a competitive player and someone who focuses on that, where do you see locations fitting in as a whole? And do you think they will play a major part in less consistent decks like these limited decks will be?
I think that there are several locations that we've seen that can add some really good, such as the Amethyst one. It can add some
Mm-hmm.
really good draw factor to decks that wouldn't necessarily have access to it. Especially when in things like draft and sealed, you're taking away the color or the ink restriction. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it's going to be very interesting to see, and I'm not sure yet. I can't wait to find out, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're 2 days away from time of
Yep.
recording. By the time this goes out, it'll be the next. It'll be Inklands will be released the next day. So we're gonna have our answer pretty soon. And I guess the next question, limited question, I will pose to you, Nive, is what do you think the best ways are to prepare for a limited event, whether it be sealed, pre-constructed, or draft?
Yeah. So, the first one that I always share is a logistics tip, which
Mm-hmm.
is bring enough sleeves for every card that you're going to open. So, if you're playing sealed, bring 72 sleeves. If you're doing draft, bring 48 sleeves. Unlike constructed, you are able to switch out cards in between games, and just having them all sleeved and available for you is fantastic. And They're all automatically protected the moment you open them up. You might not play with an enchanted card, and if you don't have sleeves for it, then you might be out of it. Might have it, sleeveless. Though I'm pretty sure a lot of stores will have extra sleeves just in case. In terms of gameplay itself, one of the things is know what the cards do. Mostly, like, you can be surprised about like the super rares and legendaries. You don't have to learn too much about those, but knowing what every common does, what every uncommon does, and what every rare does will really elevate your game, as you'll be able to kind of learn to play around those cards because they are the most prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to play around say, being able to play around an RLS legacy
Yeah.
if it appears that that's something that the opponent can do. Understanding what cards of yours can be removed right away with a rush character or with a removal spell. Those things will up your game just a couple notches, and usually that's enough to go from 1 win to 2 wins in a draft.
Well, there you go. Also, I mean, go watch Nive's draft prep video. It'll be out by the time this is aired, so go
Yes.
watch that. Go watch all of his stuff on draft. I'm going to say that multiple times. But obviously, you said these specific cards. What do you think cards that people need to look out for and look to put in their decks once they do open them and start trying to, like, where do you see the bigger cards? And I guess most bombs that people get will go in nearly every deck just because they're that good. But you said like these commons and uncommons, those cards that we're going to see more of in these decks. What are the ones you think people should look for?
Yeah, so in the rare spots, what you should be looking for are the 4 cost locations.
Okay.
So Fane, RLS Legacy, McDuck Manor, and the Queen's Castle Mirror Chamber. All 4 of them are fantastic. All 4 of them are great cards to add in. Another great cards to add in are what I'm starting to call brawler cards. A prime example of a brawler card is Scar Vicious Cheater.
Mm-hmm.
Cards that whenever they banish something in a challenge, they ready themselves. So in this set, we have Captain Hook. It's either seasoned sword fighter or
Master Swordsman.
Master Swordsman. Yes. So Captain Hook, Master Swordsman, and Pyros Lava Titan
Mm-hmm.
are both big examples of that for this set. Obviously, you want removal, and along came Zeus. Rise of the Titans is a card that I consider premium removal in this set because there's a lot of good locations and there's a lot of good items. This is the set with the best items so far. I would look at those. Most of the 3-cost items are fantastic. Speaking of which, so
Mm-hmm.
Mally's Fishhook, Captain Hook's Rapier, Sumerian Talisman. Those 3 are probably my favorite 3-drops in the whole set.
Okay.
Just by the value that you can get from them. And all of these are rare and lower. You'll want card advantage cards because there's a lot less card advantage in this set compared to Rise of the Floodborn. Almost half as much card advantage. So Grammatala, Tinkerbell, How Far I'll Go are kind of must grabs as well. There's a lot more bodyguards. Bodyguards are great. Always
Mm-hmm.
grab bodyguards, always grab evasives. If you're playing a challenge deck, always grab supports. And that's pretty much it, really.
Awesome. So I guess something I've personally realized is that the bodyguards are a lot better in this set for limited. Obviously, you have cards like Nani, 5 cost, 3/6 with 2 lore has bodyguard. That's always great. The 2 lore is amazing. I'm trying to build a bodyguard deck. That is my goal, and obviously to get some locations in there. Sean, the question I have for you now is if if people are looking through their limited packs, and this is more for draft than sealed, if what cards do you think they should pick out that may not be great in a limited deck, but can be played and constructed that would help them save money in that sense? Do you have specific cards that you think are good for that?
I absolutely do. I think probably some of the better grabs are obviously like Jafar, Striking Illusionist. A lot of the legendaries and super rares,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, if you see them, you pick them up basically no matter what. I think the new Emerald Ursula, Deceiver of All, I think she's an absolutely always grab no matter what. Some of the more notable rares like Morph, I think Morph is an always grab as well as the boss is on a roll. Having a singable way to gain lore and to filter cards is probably pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Bare Necessities is also a
Yeah,
great rare to grab. We don't really like, obviously, songs and items and locations may not be as common in a limited deck, and people will have some, but more or less, it's kind of these decks are usually character heavy, and so. But when we look at regular constructed, a whole new world, grab your swords, be prepared. So like this is the first three that come to mind. Probably the first most prevalent three. Frenzy on their side obviously is always prevalent too. And so that card and also the Ursula Deceiver of all that you mentioned, it's only an uncommon. So you should be able to see that and get those cards because but the rares, like you mentioned, are gonna be up there. I mean, Morph is we've seen nothing like it. It's basically a ditto from Pokemon. Essentially, you can
yeah,
put
pretty
anything you
much.
want on top of it, and so always have that thought in the back of your mind that when you are building a limited deck, and this is essentially in draft sense, think about those cards that are going to be in constructed. But if you are going for the win, and you just want to put your name at the top and get more packs of surprise, there are some cards you ignore that you would rather grab a different card so it makes your deck better. So something to think about. But Nive, the next question I have for you is what are the best ways in Rise of the Floodborn specifically to build a limited deck? Are there like different archetypes that you see that could work if you get all the cards?
In Rise of the Floodborn or Into the Inklands?
Into the Inklands, yes, my bad.
No, you're good. If you so just like general archetype strategies,
Yeah.
yeah. Clearly, there's going to be a locations deck
Mm-hmm.
where you're going to have some characters that want to be at locations, and you're going to have locations that want to have characters there, and that those are just a nice little mesh. It's going to feel like a tink. It's going to give you that tinkerer's mind kind of
Mm-hmm.
effect where you like get these little combos here and there. There's always an aggro deck that wants to just curve out. That will always be a thing. I feel like challenger decks are now just gonna be a standard thing in limited decks, which I'm happy for because I love challenger decks.
Okay.
There's a pirates deck that is
Mm-hmm.
around. There's a couple pirate synergies in the lower rarities that you can interact with. It's more of like pirates plus captain, because you have the Mr. Smee that wants a captain. You have the Jolly Roger that wants pirates. There are some grumblings of a ramp deck. I don't personally see it myself, but it's other people see it, so it's something to talk about. Those are the big ones that I see. Obviously, we have 3 whole months to find new archetypes, so those are just the ones that I see off the top.
Awesome. Well, obviously, you're always looking for ways to make your deck better. You don't know what you're going to get in your packs, though. So,
Mhm.
to keep up with some of these archetypes, it feels like it has to be something you see early. Because if you start to basically, at the beginning, you see these cards and you say, oh, these work together. Yes. And then you can build your deck around that. But if you only get those later in the game, more of the time your deck that you've built already isn't going to play into the factor of that, and you can't always bank on the fact that you're going to get the pirate cards that you need. You're not going to bank on the fact that you're able to get a Jolly Roger for a pirate deck, and
Mhm.
so just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So, for example, I did a playtest draft a couple days ago, and I grabbed an early Queen of Hearts. For those who don't know, the Queen of Hearts once, whenever she quests, she gives the other villains you have in play an extra lore.
We know this card all too well.
Oh,
This is the card we revealed. So
Yes.
yes, yes,
so
yes,
we do have a
We
very
love the queen.
we love the
yes.
queen.
So I tried to build around her and it just didn't quite work out, but that's okay because I was able to see that it wasn't going to work out because I grabbed her early and I was able to pivot. So the general rule of thumb that I have is you don't need to commit to an archetype in pack 1, but you do need to commit to one by the end of pack 2.
Okay.
Obviously, if you want to commit earlier, you can, but don't feel the pressure to commit in
Exactly.
pack 1.
Well, you just changed my mind on how I think about it. So, would you look at that? He's already helping all of us get better at limited. Sean, I do have one more question for you before we get into limited question or into listener questions. If you had to pick an archetype to play unlimited, it doesn't have to be in this set. It could just be overall. What is something you think would be fun for people to look out for in a limited stage?
I think it's really fun to have cool typal payoffs when it comes to a limited setting. So maybe if like with Queen of Hearts specifically, great villain payoff, and if you can swing it to where you can stack what villains you do have and insert whatever type you like in there, they can be good fun. I love that kind of thing. I love seeing that.
Yeah, and I mean, with these limited formats, you aren't restricted to color,
Nope.
and so you can play Leylands, just for example, because we're on this from all different colors, and there's a solid amount of good villains in this set.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, though, Nive, it's obviously just something that you have to kind of get figured out relatively early if you are able to build up a nice stack of them. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're able to build up like nearly an entire deck with villain cards and have Queen of Hearts, that could win you the game. And the Queen of Hearts is only an uncommon, so I don't feel like it obviously is more uncommon to get, but it wouldn't be that hard to figure out if you did see it early enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just in the draft that I did, it was just clear that I wasn't going to get enough villains for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I still played her because I was just low on characters. But
Mm.
yeah, no, like being able to notice that if you're starting to commit to an archetype and you see that it might not work out, it's okay to kind of dip out of it if you're
Yeah.
still early on.
So the next part we have is listener questions. We put a little finder
Woohoo!
thing today. So the first one is a pretty fun question. Nive, what's your croquet mallet of this set? Jake from 40born says you'll know what this means.
Yeah, so I kind of don't, but
Oh.
but so the reason that I say that is because I was on the 40born podcast last week,
Mm,
and one of my favorite cards that we talked about was Croquet Mallet for Rise of the Floodborn.
mm,
And so this could mean two things. It could either mean what does he think my like mind games card for this set is? Because I said like Croquet Mallet's good because it implements this kind of mental pressure on the opponent.
mm-hmm.
Because now any of my character, for those who don't know, Croquet Mallet is a one cost item that you can banish to give something rush. So what I kept saying was like, if you can play a mallet turn 1 for the rest of the game until you use that mallet, all of your characters effectively have rush, or your opponent has to treat like every character you have has rush.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can mean that, or it can mean something that I disagree with the other people focused on. Yeah, and so Croquet Mallet like effectively gives all my characters rush. The opponent has to treat like all my characters have rush. The other thing he could mean is it's a card that I disagree with other people in the limited community with, because a lot of
Mm,
other people in the limited community weren't as hot on Croquet Mallet as I was. I'm not saying first pick Croquet Mallet if you do a Rise of the Floodborn draft. I'm just saying it's not a bad card to play. So for the Mind Game card, I would say it's Maui's Fishhook,
mm,
just due to the pure versatility that card gives you. If it's the card that I disagree with the general community with, it would probably be Blue, von Bruenwald the 13th. I think he's pretty good. He's a bodyguard, which is great. Yeah, he has 0 strength, but instead of dealing damage, he's going to gain 2 lore, which I think is fine. It's going to do its
Yeah.
job. It's going to do its job. Yeah, so depending on what he means by croquet mallet, those are my 2 answers.
Awesome. And then the next 2 we have came from the same person. This is Adam underscore DDAVP.
Hey,
First
Adam.
question is general heuristics for evaluating a new card type, locations. How might you expect your decks to look? Example, 1 to 4 locations, 0 to 2 items, 2 to 4 songs, rest characters. Got numbers on that? Because we all know you are a numbers person.
Yes, I am a numbers person. So let's start with the heuristics
Mm-hmm.
of like trying to figure out a new card type. So I'm going to use locations for the example. So what I try to do is try to translate that card type into a card type that I more understand. It's not going to be a perfect translation just because that's just why different card types exist.
Mm-hmm.
A great example that I have is trying to translate the German word Krankenwagen into English. Krankenwagen is ambulance, but it strictly translates into suffer car. So when you're translating it to suffer car, you can kind of get an idea of what it's supposed to be. But it's obviously it's not ambulance. And so you might still get miscommunication with it.
Yeah.
But whenever I first saw locations, one of my initial thoughts was, okay, so if I can translate this over to a character, it's a character with 0 strength that has to quest every turn. It enters exerted, can't sing, it's not protected by bodyguards, and it grants abilities to characters that I pay ink to pair with. And so that's kind of how I translated it at the very beginning. And it's still a pretty decent translation for what it does. Obviously, I'm missing other aspects,
Mm-hmm.
but that's kind of how I looked at it at the start. And so that's kind of how I translate new card types. I did a similar thing with battles when those were introduced in Magic the Gathering.
Mm.
I can't remember what I compared them to, but that's kind of what I do with locations. As for account in limited, it entirely depends on the archetype that you're going for. If you're going for locations, you're obviously going to put in more locations. If you're going the pure aggro bodyguards deck, I'd play like 1 or 2 locations. Just because I want to get as much value as I can out of those bodyguards.
Yeah.
And so that's my answer. I don't have like a solid like, oh yeah, you play X to Y locations. Just like with items and actions, it entirely depends on what your deck wants to do.
Well, there you have it. Just it. Yeah. I think it is kind of dependent on what you pull in your packs, essentially. Uh, But then the next question we have: what is the best way to utilize locations when on the play versus on the draw? Like more going into the 1 and 2 drops.
Yeah, so your Neverlands, your Nottinghams, your Matanuis,
Bayou.
Bio. Yeah, so interestingly, so Bayou is one of the 2 locations that I would not play generally. The other one being Bell's House.
Yeah, Bell's house. Yeah.
Just because the 3 willpower is incredibly squishy. But the way that I would play these 1 or 2 drops, I really like them on the play. Because, in fact, I think Neverland or Deville Manor is the best turn 1 play on the play in Limited. Because the best thing that they're going to do to take that out is playing a 2-drop. And then on your turn 2, you get a lore. And then say you play a 2-3. If they choose to exert that 2/2 in any way, shape, or form, your 2/3 gets to take it out. And there's very few ways for them to take out that location on their turn 2. A couple of, and like the only thing I can think of is like a Stitch Little Rocket plus the 2/2. I will find my way onto the 2/2. So there's very few ways to take out a 1-drop location by turn 2. And so I think most of the time that on the play those locations are going to be too lore for you, and also the lore advantage that you get from your opponent not questing and focusing on taking down that location if they choose to do that. On the play, it depends on how aggressive the opponent is playing. If they put down a Kita on turn 1, I will probably not play a Neverland on my turn 1 on the draw. Instead, I would probably play my own Kita just to pair with them.
Yeah.
But so when it comes to deck building, I don't want to only have locations or only have characters. I like to have a mix of both in there if I can. When it comes to the 2-cost locations, I like all of them. Matanui can get you a lot of card advantage because turning one of your characters into ink on a banish is technically card advantage. And then Maui's Place of Exile gives resist, which is fantastic ability. And then the Nottingham and Forbidden Mountain are 6 willpower, which is a lot of willpower.
Yeah.
And so I really like these locations. Again, it's playing off your opponent, seeing what they have. If they are playing the aggro deck, I don't want to play locations early on. I want to play cards to slow them down.
Yeah.
And then put my locations later on. But if they're playing a slower deck, then yeah, I'd consider playing some locations early on. Get a little bit of lore generation. They're going to get banished. They're eventually going to get banished. So, but I'm not upset with a 1-cost location getting you 2 lore.
Well, there you go. Sean, I'll kick it to you. Any last thoughts on Limited in general that you have for this weekend coming into the Inklands?
Go into it with the intentions that things are going to change and they're going to change up pretty quickly, and have fun.
Yeah, always have fun with this type of stuff. Nive, last thoughts that you have on Limited, and then where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so my motto for this set is big board energy. So what that means is I want to have at least 2 characters in play at all times whenever I get the chance. Get 2 characters in play. Play as few actions as you feel comfortable. I'm not saying play no actions, but most of the items and characters and locations are better than the actions that cost. So big board energy, just put things on the table. But yeah, so that's kind of my motto for this set, to just kind of keep an eye on, just kind of keep in your mind. For those who can find me, you can find me on the site formerly known as Twitter as Nive the Nerd with the underscores. You can also find me on the YouTubes, Nive's Nerd Corner. I do a lot of limited stuff, and I do a lot of nerdy number math things.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Folks, if you are going out to Limited events, head on over our Twitter and let us know in the post of this episode how you do. What cards do you pull? Do you get any enchantments? We have 18 now, so there's possibility to open more, and maybe you're just getting a box and you're getting some product this weekend. Let us know how that goes. Again, Nive, thank you so much for joining us today. That was episode 36 of the Glimmer podcast, everyone. Glimmer on.
Goodbye.